Oh, do you guys want to see something cool? It's another reminder that nobody listens to sociologists, even though everything we do and say is correct all the time with no exceptions. Uh, Denver experimented with giving people $1,000 a month. It reduced homelessness and increased full-time employment, a study found. Wow. You know, I feel like I've seen so many of these over the course of my streaming open quotes career. And I never get tired of reading them because it just makes me feel a little more smug every time, like internally, you know, even though the results are the same every time. So sociology is the only field where in order to prove the validity of your claims, you not only have to do an experiment to prove that you're correct, you have to keep doing it forever. You know? Like a physicist only has to prove reliably once to an international community that a given process works. A sociologist has to keep proving it forever. Twice. Okay, twice, not once, twice, sure. Well, more than twice certainly for sociologists. It doesn't necessarily buy happiness, but both personal experience and academic research suggests that when people have more money, they're more likely to lead a pleasant life. Wow. The results so far, participants who were sleeping in the streets at the start of the experiment, now with more money in their pockets, said they were feeling safer, experiencing better mental health, and enjoying access to more stable and welcome living arrangements. Wow. Last October, more than 800 people were enrolled in the basic income plan, but they didn't all receive the same stipend. There are three groups. One receives $1,000 a month for a year. Another receives $6,500 up front and then $500 a month from there. And the other gets just $50 a month. Man, sucks to be a part of that last group, huh? While cautioning this was only an interim 6-month follow-up for what is a year-long program, the researchers nonetheless found stark and encouraging changes in participants' material conditions. Those who received $500 a month or more had seen the biggest gains. Wow. At the start, fewer than 10% said they were living in their own home or apartment, while at the 6-month point, more than a third said they were living in their own housing. God damn. Mm. The guaranteed income also dramatically reduced visible homelessness. When the initiative began, some 6% of the people in the $1,000 a month group said they were sleeping outside. The number fell to 0 6 months later. The group that received a large lump sum similarly reported a decline from 10% sleeping outdoors to 3%. Even those who received just $50 moved indoors to a degree, declining to 4% from 8%. 34% of participants said they resided in their own home or apartment, up from just 8% a half year earlier. Yeah. Other cities are trying UBI. Nice. Yeah, we're going to keep doing this forever. Like this, we're like, I don't know what it's going to take, you know? The fact of the matter is, even if you ignore the fact that it's just morally correct to give people the resources necessary to comfortably live and be able to get food and whatever, it is just a good economic sell to do this because there are enormous costs associated with homelessness. First of all, and this is going to sound cold because it's like, oh, you can't put a monetary value on human. Well, you can, and cities do. So let's just move with that, okay? First of all, massive decrease in property values. When homeless people camp in cities, which they do because they have to, because they can't afford not to, those areas suffer massive decreases in property values and in foot traffic because people don't want to walk around potentially belligerent, dangerous, or just sad to look at homeless people, which means a reduction in foot traffic, which means a reduction in local businesses access, which means a reduction in city access, which means a reduction in the value of those properties. Sometimes the reduction in property value is in the millions just on a single block. Think about it. There being a homeless encampment, or homeless people generally, on a single block of a single street can reduce the collective price of businesses in that area by millions. And that's only with like mid-rise buildings. If we're talking areas that have skyscrapers, potentially like homelessness and income inequality can significantly reduce the overall value of a city. Look at what's going on in parts of LA, Skid Row. Look at what's going on in like parts of San Francisco. Like there's an enormous amount of money left on the table there purely because it's just a dampening to that area of the city. Also, the cost in like policing from like harassing homeless people on anti-loitering stuff to like throwing people in the drunk tank for a day, then toss them back out. Homeless people cost society a ton because we don't do them the decency of providing them even the basic like bare necessities of existence. And as a consequence, like it like I guess like the it's I don't really know. It's just so senseless. It's so senseless. It's so silly. It's so dumb. It hurts everyone. It's so dumb. And then if you help them a bit, they can get back up on their feet and they can do things that make them more economically productive. And then they're like contributing a net gain to society rather than just not contributing a net loss, you know? It saves money to do them well. But a lot of Americans want homelessness to be suffering, you know? A lot of Americans see homeless people or poor people or criminals or whatever other disenfranchised group, and they're like, no, we can't give them things. Why should they get free things when my upper middle class suburban cousin who had to work his entire life didn't get free things? You know? And that's their mentality, and then nothing gets done and nothing changes, and like it stays bad forever. What does UBI stand for? Universal Basic Income. It's the idea that things could be a lot better if you literally just gave people money flat out, period, no strings attached. The research we have on UBI is generally pretty positive, especially an indication it doesn't actually seem to decrease people's willingness to do work. So that's cool. What if the person who wanted free things worked hard their whole lives too? Yeah, I always like the implied statement that being homeless isn't hard. Like, if we're sort of like measuring rewards by suffering here, working a 9 to 5 your whole life is hard. I'm not going to say it's not. I mean, I guess it depends on the 9 to 5, but like, oh, you got what for that? What'd you get? Well, you got a house in the suburbs. You know, you got like a life, right? Being homeless is pretty hard. What do you get for being homeless? Nothing. Well, like, what are we talking about? Like, what are we even talking about right now? Bosch, fix your collar. What's wrong with my collar? It's splayed out. It's fine. What's wrong with that? I mean, there we go. Yeah. Sorry. Thank you for. Do you prefer a UBI or a negative income tax? You mean a regressive income tax? No, I think UBIs are fine. The main issue that I have with UBIs though is that UBIs don't decommodify anything. So even if people are provided a UBI, the problem is that like that doesn't change the fact that housing prices can go up. Is the UBI going to go up every single year with inflation? The problem is like judging from how rarely the federal minimum wage is increased, it gets me the impression that like even if we had a UBI, it would be maybe okay for like a year or two or three, but then inflation and housing prices would go up and food prices would go up and everything would go up. And then it's like, oh, wow, the UBI like just 10 years ago was worth effectively double what it is now. And then it takes 10 more years for them to update it, which is why I think UBI is good, but I favor decommodification as a first, like a first strategy in a lot of cases. So for homeless people, I don't just want a UBI. I also want like state built or like city built housing that is meant to serve with like an incredibly heavy subsidy towards use by people who are in a low income circumstance. Historically, we call this like Section 8 housing, which has a very negative association to it because the city government tends to build pretty shitty accommodations for like poor people. And Section 8 housing varies in quality area to area. There are some areas of America where Section 8 housing is basically just like miserable, and there are some areas where it's pretty okay. Like Google says this is Section 8 housing. I've seen stretches of Section 8 housing that look pretty okay. It doesn't have to be bad is the thing. Like Section 8 housing is just a form of like government assistance, you know? Theoretically, you could have Section 8 housing that's luxury, though I don't think you should do that. That seems like kind of a waste, but let's make them nice, you know? And that's doable and make them available to people of, you know, lower socioeconomic strata, preferably, you know, the people in the lowest at first, so we help them out. Um, and yeah, go from there. Just some nice row houses, you know? Just build them out big. Hell yes. Make them some apartment buildings. 500 families to a building. I know Enbiota. I think both need to be done, but I think decommodification is a pretty easy sell for something like housing. Is there something wrong with commodities? Well, I am a communist. I mean, I think that in the long run, while there might be some things that are better relegated to market principles, perhaps like some luxury goods or stuff that isn't directly associated with the well-being of humans, I think that in the long run, it would be a good idea to find social incentives outside of the acquisition of currency. Or at the very least, we would stop having capital and start having some kind of currency that isn't tied to uh, capital accumulation. Like if you want to use the term labor vouchers to sound like a gigantic nerd, you can go for that. But the basic idea is if you're going to have currency, it should be a kind of currency that can't be used to reinvest in capital, because that's how you get, well, capitalism, which I don't like. But I think it's a slow and incremental process. Economic shifts, especially shifts in economic motivators and incentives, are very complicated and they're very difficult to plan out for and they're very difficult to predict. So what we need to do is move slowly. I think some things are easier arguments for decommodification than others. For example, Medicare, Medicare for all, that's decommodified medical care, where now it's all run through the government and people just pay the effective cost in taxes, you know? Um, I think that'd be great because a massive drain on our healthcare system, a massive increase in its overall cost is the weight and the bloat of insurance companies, which full decommodification would address. That's why America has such ineffective and expensive private healthcare. Housing is another easy one. I think that to an extent, food would also be a very easy early case for decommodification. I also believe in UBIs because I think that we can't just instantly decommodify everything, if we even wanted to. I'm kind of dumb, but don't we need to reinvest in capital for expansion of services? Well, it wouldn't in that case be capital in the same way. The idea would be if in such a system, and this is very far down the line, but the idea would be in such a system beyond market socialism and proper socialism, the way you would like develop out a business or anything to that extent would be like in close care and in conjunction with the local community you built out from. You could rely on stuff like grants, or maybe it wouldn't even be a cost thing. Maybe if you could make an argument to a city like, hey, we have like an enterprise we'd like to put here, like we make really nice shoes. And I think that your community could use this really nice shoe store or whatever. Rather than like buying the land and building it up or whatever, the city would want you to be there and would literally just provide the resources, the land, the what have you, and just relegate it to the broader commodity chain that allows you to produce those shoes. Now, I'm simplifying massively here, but do keep in mind that a full and detailed explanation of exactly how capitalism functions is also insane. Like, where did this toothbrush at my local Walgreens get made? And then like you didn't have to cut me off as you're like opening this gigantic scroll of like 87 different supply chains that connect the entire planet. It's like, wahoo, you at the baseline, things start simple and they grow in complexity as we find ways to refine and make more efficient these systems. So, I wouldn't claim like anything should be done just like right off the bat, but there are easy steps you could make, like early on. UBI is relatively simple. Decommodifying housing is something that we already do to an extent with Section 8 housing. That's just more of a subsidy than full decommodification, but you could lean into that, Certainly, that would be a good place to start. And make it good. Make it tasty, That's nice, Scuba. I'm happy to hear that. Mine, Sasha, yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's a process. Though it has been shown that UBI does not reduce people's incentive to work. Was that Norway? Hold on. Norway UBI incentive to work. Was that Norway or was that Finland? I think that might have been Finland. Yep, it was Finland. Interestingly, the final results of Finland's program, released this spring, found that a basic income actually had a positive impact on employment. People on the basic income were more likely to be employed than those in the control group, and the differences were statistically significant, albeit small. So, if anything, the evidence seems to indicate that a UBI would actually have a positive effect on people's willingness to work, which makes sense to me for a few reasons, but I don't want to get into it because it's complicated. Didn't they stop funding the program after a few times? Well, yes, because again, nobody listens to sociologists. Yeah, it was a trial thing. It was a study. It wasn't like a full-on consistent government program. That's true, Kazium. Yeah, even a small margin there is pretty significant. I mean, you can get into the study Bastards Passion. I remember reading it on stream a while ago. Just generally speaking, guys, it's good for people to feel good. The more deprived and dispossessed people are, the argument is that makes them work harder, but that's actually not true. It just makes them hopeless and miserable. It makes them drains on society because they're not educated enough to be very productive. It makes them antagonistic towards the law and law enforcement, which, may be justified, but also is bad when it comes to like social, just general like social well-being and agitation. Like everything gets worse, you want everyone to be on at least some kind of parity, like some kind of even playing field. And that makes everything better. A strong, robust middle class, the thing that we had like from the New Deal onward, at least like I guess like the mid 1950s up until Reagan, like for about 30 years, that was probably the best era that America had in terms of like relative prosperity for people in the in. It's worth knowing, by the way, of course, that even during that era of the great middle class, that was very much like a middle class white people thing, Those gains were not equally distributed. So I'm not arguing that things were better in the 50s. I'm only arguing that in the groups that shared in that in those benefits, there were like undeniable advantages to having a less stratified income distribution, where the boss made like 5 to 10 times as much as you rather than 500 times as much as you. You are creating a hyper-idealistic image of the average homeless person as a principally functional member of society, which does not match reality. Bro, I'm just citing data. Fuck off. What the dude, I grew up in LA, okay? I'm not some like privileged ass, like grew up in a gated community. All right. I walked by homeless people every day on my way to my high school job. All right. I know a lot of them are crazy drug addicts. Okay. I'm just repeating the data, you know? And also, yeah, a lot of them are drug addicts. Do you think that just like cuts them off from humanity forever? You know, like give them the resources to get clean. They did that in Portugal and it helped, you know? A lot of them are crazy. Sure, like, yeah, we shut down the state's mental institutions. It seems like it's a big deal to take care of these guys, but in reality, we are taking care of them either way. Like, there are two ways out of this, right? You either fix the problem or you just like, I don't know, throw them into a big blender. And while there are plenty of local politicians in Los Angeles who are trying to make that latter option legal, I don't think that's the ethically correct solution. So I think it would actually be better if we try to make life better for everyone, you know, and I think that raises I think that raises the bar for everyone. Um, we can get this. Like this is doable, you know? It's not impossible. Like America is worse at this than a bunch of other countries, you know? It's not like we're working off no data on this. Like there are absolutely things that could be done. People don't realize how mentally destabilizing it is to be homeless. Drugs become a necessity to get through the day every bit as much as food and water. I genuinely, I don't disagree. Yeah, like when you have a country where like a third of the Gen Z and Gen and millennials are like weed addicts who have to smoke a ton of weed to get through their like service worker job. No shit, homeless people are on fentanyl. Like what the like, dude, their life sucks. Like you can't go to the DMV without getting baked first, and you're going to judge them for like doing some harder shit while they're on the street. Like what the like? Yeah, it's like how you have these dipshit Stepford wife like drinks 3 glasses of wine every night and is addicted to Xanax ass white women who haven't worked a day in their lives judging homeless people when they're addicts to 3 different pharmacy drugs to cope with the burden of having the husband that cheats on them and children that don't love them. Meanwhile, like homeless people are out there licking butt sweat off of park benches for nourishment, and you're mad at them for what? Drinking? What are you doing? Like what? Shut up. Fuck off. Jesus Christ. You both need help. Them more than you.